The first point of education to review is freedom of movement and contact on screens. Here, the highlighted offensive player, Daniel Gafford, moves into the path of the trailing defender, Grady Dick, and Gafford does not give him the opportunity to avoid the contact. This is an offensive foul, and it was correctly called. To be considered legal, the screener must get directly into his opponent's path and give him the opportunity to avoid contact. This next play will show another example of an offensive foul committed by a screener. The highlighted offensive player, Toumani Camara, moves to set a screen, but he then extends both arms and he pushes the on-ball defender, Terry Rozier. This illegal contact by Camara clearly affects Rozier's ability to play defense, and the offensive foul was called correctly by the trail official. The final example in this section will again show illegal contact that occurs in a screening situation. The highlighted offensive player, Domantas Sabonis, does not give the moving defensive player, DeLon Wright, an opportunity to avoid the contact, and an offensive foul for an illegal screen was correctly called. Again, to be considered legal, the screener must get directly into his opponent's path and give him the opportunity to avoid contact. Next, we will review some examples of defensive players affecting offensive players' freedom of movement on the perimeter. The highlighted defensive player, Matisse Thybulle, wraps his left arm around his opponent, Bam Adebayo, as Adebayo sets a legal screen. This illegal arm wrap by Thybulle clearly affects Adebayo's freedom of movement, limiting his ability to roll to the basket. This is illegal contact, and the defensive foul was correctly called. Next, we will look at an example of illegal contact on the perimeter initiated by an offensive player, executing a swim move as Johnson illegally lifts the left arm of his defender, Luke Kennard. This is illegal contact by Johnson, and the offensive foul was correctly called by the slot official. The freedom of movement guidelines extend from the perimeter into the post area. Here, the highlighted defensive player, Dillon Brooks, wraps his right arm around the waist of the offensive player, Victor Wembanyama, as Wembanyama looks to receive the entry pass. This illegal wrap by Brooks, seen clearly on the replay, was correctly ruled a defensive foul by the lead official. Next, we will look at an example of illegal contact initiated by an offensive player in the post. The highlighted offensive post player, Kelly Olynyk, uses both arms to dislodge the post defender, Tim Hardaway Jr., from his legally obtained position. This is an offensive foul for dislodging, and it was correctly called. This next play is an example of an offensive foul for illegally wiping away the opponent's arm. The highlighted offensive player, Trendon Watford, uses his left arm to knock away the legal arm of his defender, Tyrese Halliburton. This is an offensive foul on Watford. Defensive players are allowed to legally place their hand on the back of an offensive player with the ball and his back to the basket, and the offensive player cannot initiate contact by wiping away that arm. Keep your eye on the highlighted player on this next play. The offensive post player, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, maintains his dribble with his back to the basket for more than the allowed 5 seconds, and he is correctly called for a violation. An offensive player in his front court, below the free throw line extended, is not allowed to dribble the ball with his back or his side to the basket while being actively guarded by an opponent for more than 5 seconds. The next point of education to review is traveling, and this first play will show an example of a traveling violation on the perimeter. The offensive player, Gigi Jackson, establishes his left foot as his pivot foot, but he then drags and slides that left foot prior to releasing the ball on the dribble. This is a traveling violation, and it was correctly called here. Our next example in the traveling section shows a violation that occurs after the offensive player has gathered the ball. The offensive player, Patrick Beverley, drives toward the basket, but after he gathers the ball, he takes more than the allowed 2 steps before releasing the ball on the field goal attempt. The replay clearly shows Beverley gathering the ball with his left foot on the floor, and he then steps with his right, then his left, and finally with his right foot again for an illegal 3rd step. A traveling violation was needed on this play. Watch this next play closely. The highlighted offensive player, P.J. Washington, ends his dribble and gathers the ball with his left foot on the floor. He then jumps off of and lands on that same left foot as he spins towards the basket. This is a traveling violation, as a player may not step with the same foot consecutively after gathering the ball. Our final example in this section shows a traveling violation that occurs in the post. The offensive post player, Damian Jones, gathers the ball with both feet on the floor, but he then jumps and lands on both feet 2 separate times prior to releasing the ball on his shot attempt. This is a traveling violation, and it was correctly called.